Story recap here. Today, I'm going to explain a horror film called The Sadness. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. One morning, Jim asks Kat not to go to work, but she tells him she can't. Kat then mentions their trip to Kenting the following week, which her boyfriend forgot. Jim says his friend needs his help with work, adding that a German ad agency is involved, and the money is pretty good. Jim apologetically tells Kat he really needs that job, leaving his girlfriend disappointed because she rarely takes a break from work. Moments later, Jim watches the news about the Alvin virus. The doctor talking about the virus states that experts are terrified of its mutation potential. He then explains that the dormant protein chains in Alvin are similar to rabies. The doctor warns the public to take the outbreak seriously, saying Alvin is a real threat to public health. Meanwhile, Jim takes a look outside the balcony and sees an old woman on a rooftop, asking if she's okay. However, the old woman only turns to face him, revealing her bloody clothes. And she suddenly disappears when Jim briefly looks away to talk to Kat. After that, Jim talks to his neighbor, Mr. Lin, from his own balcony. Jim notices that the man has a cold, so he tells him he should go to the hospital. However, Mr. Lin refuses and says the doctors will just tell him to go home and get some rest, adding that the news about the virus is just a hoax. Then, Jim bids Mr. Lin goodbye before charging his phone and taking Kat to the train station. On their way to the station, Jim and Kat see the cops arresting a man involved in the death of someone. Then, eventually, they reach the train station, where Jim promises to cook dinner for Kat. A few minutes later, Jim heads home and sees the same police car from earlier, noticing that all its doors are open and the cops are gone. After that, Jim goes to a diner first to get some food, where the old lady from the rooftop spits on a customer before dousing the vendor with boiling oil. Then, the customer she spat on repeatedly stabs his friend in the neck, leaving everyone scared. Meanwhile, Jim slowly backs away from the old woman until he reaches the streets, where a vehicle runs her over. The driver is acting weird, just like the old woman and the customer from the diner, and it's obvious that they have been infected with something. As everything descends into chaos, Jim quickly runs away when the infected people start chasing him. Soon, he reaches his apartment and locks himself inside before trying to call Kat. Then, he turns on the television and sees that all the channels are showing the same advisory, except for one that shows a cartoon. However, it isn't long before he hears an announcement outside, which states that all men must report to the district office. Unfortunately, the announcer casually adds that they will be castrated while the women will be violated in the streets, leaving Jim worried about Kat. So he texts his girlfriend and asks where she is, and while doing that, he fails to see the man coming from the balcony. Jim is too busy telling Kat what's happening and that he'll come for her, but when he finally notices the intruder, he immediately turns around. An infected Mr. Lin tries stabbing Jim with garden shears, but Jim manages to hold its blades. Unfortunately, Mr. Lin cuts off 2 of Jim's fingers, causing him to kick the man away. But Mr. Lin simply eats one of Jim's fingers before spitting it out. So Jim hits him in the head with a toaster before he can do anything else. Then, Jim quickly takes his phone and leaves as Mr. Lin starts to get up. Moments later, Jim covers his hand with a small cloth from a parked motorcycle. Then, he runs away after witnessing some infected people attack a young man. Eventually, he reaches his motorcycle and tries to turn on the engine quietly, careful not to alert the infected people around. But of course, he attracts their attention, so he immediately speeds off as the infected folks chase him. Meanwhile, Kat quietly reads a novel on the train on her way to work. There, a businessman talks to Kat and won't stop distracting her, leaving her irritated. She then tells the businessman she'll go to the cops if he doesn't leave her alone, offending the man. However, Kat refuses to continue listening to him and lets another passenger take her seat. On the other hand, an infected passenger starts stabbing other people, and soon the whole thing turns into a bloodbath. Eventually, the other passengers subdue the infected man, but another infected guy starts stabbing the commuters. It isn't long before more people become infected, and they bite off the flesh of their victims. At the same time, the girl that Kat let take her seat is stabbed in the eye by the businessman, so she tries her best to calm her down. With everything that's happening, the passengers immediately flee as soon as the train doors open, and Kat accidentally leaves her phone. Kat escapes with the passenger she helped on the train, Molly, who urges her to leave. However, Kat refuses to abandon Molly and tells her they need to get to the hospital. Unfortunately, the businessman soon finds them and starts chasing them, sending them running for their lives. They then run into a commuter and asks him for help, but the businessman bites off his nose before killing him with an axe. With no other choice, Kat and Molly run and manage to exit the subway as one subway worker closes the door. Infuriated that the subway worker didn't help them, Molly guiltlessly punches him. Then, Kat asks him the way to the hospital, and the subway worker accompanies them there. Meanwhile, Jim tries not to throw up as he sees the dead bodies in the streets. He also witnesses a man violating a corpse, so he immediately drives away. However, Jim has to stop for a while because he already feels dizzy due to blood loss. After inspecting his injury, Jim covers his hand again with a small cloth and secures it with tape to help stop the bleeding. Then, he checks his phone to see if Kat replied before picking up the sickle on the side of the road. Seconds later, Jim sees some infected boys beating up a man with their bats. The kids are having fun torturing the poor guy, so Jim finally decides to step in. Jim beats up 2 of the boys, and when they realize they are no match for him, they eventually flee. Jim then unbinds the man and tries to help him, but it is revealed that he's also infected and actually having fun. Unfortunately, it isn't long before the boys return and start throwing stones at Jim, forcing him to leave quickly. On the other hand, the people at the hospital see the civil emergency message on television. Then, the cops guarding the door let Kat, Molly, and the subway worker inside, and the nurse immediately tends to the wounded patient. Unfortunately, one of the cops informs Kat that the ER got overrun, and the nurse soon takes Molly away for her treatment. However, Molly refuses to go anywhere without Kat, so Kat tries to comfort her. Molly then thanks Kat for saving her life, telling her she'll never forget what she's done for her. Eventually, Molly lets the nurse take her away while Kat returns to the waiting area with the subway worker. Then, Kat realizes her phone is missing and asks the subway worker if she can use his cell phone to call Jim. Meanwhile, the president of Taiwan finally gives a statement about their situation, informing everyone that the administration is working tirelessly to find a solution to their problem. On the other hand, the general states that they are dealing with a contagious disease that transforms normal people into violent folks. According to the general, the infected people will kill, violate, and torture others, so he urges everyone to follow the plan developed by the Ministry of Homeland Security. Unfortunately, the general soon shows a sign of infection, and he immediately attacks the president before blowing his head off with a grenade. After that, the patients in the waiting area start to get upset and attack each other. The cops try to contain the situation, while on the other hand, Kat gets into a physical fight with the subway worker when she refuses to return his phone. At the same time, Kat sees the businessman outside, so she quickly takes the subway worker's phone and escapes through the stairwell. Unfortunately, the businessman kills the cop with his axe as he forces his way inside the hospital, causing everyone to panic. It isn't long before more infected people arrive and attack the patients, so the subway worker hides under a gurney, ignoring Molly in the hallway. Unfortunately, the businessman finds Molly and brutally violates her. Meanwhile, Jim finally receives a message from Kat using the subway worker's phone, saying she lost her phone and she's at NTU hospital. So he immediately calls Kat and informs her he's on his way to the hospital, telling her to try to remain calm. Then, Jim instructs Kat to find a hiding place, but as they talk, Jim starts showing signs of infection. However, Jim manages to get himself together and tells Kat he'll be at the hospital soon. Moments later, the subway worker finally comes out of hiding. He then tries to find a way out of the hospital, but he comes across an infected Molly. Unfortunately, Molly notices him when he accidentally makes a noise, and several infected people subdue him before Molly violently kills him with a piece of hospital equipment. On the other hand, Kat is forced to flee and barricade the hallway doors to escape 2 infected patients and the businessman. However, the businessman manages to get through the doors and continue hunting Kat, telling her what he did to Molly. But Kat refuses to be the businessman's victim, so she surprises him from behind and kills him by bashing his head in. Then, a man opens the maternity ward next to Kat, and she immediately goes inside the room before the infected patients catch up to her. Inside the maternity ward, the man points a gun at Kat and orders her to cuff herself to the shower pipe. Then the man, Dr. Wong, turns on the shower and tells Kat the liquid is a chemical disinfecting solution. He quickly realizes that Kat is not infected and thinks she might be immune, asking what her blood type is. After that, Wong turns off the shower and instructs Kat to undress to make sure she's not infected. With no other choice, Kat starts removing her clothes, careful to keep the subway worker's phone hidden from the doctor. Wong then turns on the shower again once Kat is completely undressed, and it's all she can do not to scream as the cold chemical solution touches her skin. Meanwhile, Jim finally arrives at the hospital. Back in the ward, Wong finally uncuffs Kat and lets her get dressed before apologizing for scaring her with his 3D printed gun. Then he reveals to Kat that he tried warning people about the Alvin virus for a full year, but sadly, nobody trusts doctors anymore. He also explains how the virus affects the limbic system in a person's brain, adding that he believes the viral mutation happened through natural process. At the same time, Wong says the infected people probably understand that what they're doing is vile, but the desire is too strong for them to resist. To sum it all up, the virus makes a person do the most horrific things one can imagine. After explaining, Wong tells Kat she needs a blood test. So, Kat puts her clothes and the subway worker's phone inside the dumpster, and then she suddenly hears a baby crying. Curious, Kat opens the dumpster and finds an infected baby inside. However, before she can react, Wong injects her with a culture of the Alvin virus before cuffing her to the shower. Then, Wong closes the shower curtain before killing the baby and tells Kat they'll go to the rooftop if she doesn't show any signs of infection, intending to use her to develop a vaccine. Of course, Wong also adds that he won't hesitate to kill her if she becomes infected. Meanwhile, it is revealed that Kat still has the subway worker's phone, seeing that it's locked with a passcode. Then, Wong admits to injecting the 8 infants he found in the ward with the virus, thinking one of them might be able to generate valuable antibodies. In his defense, the infected people would have killed those babies if they had found them, adding that he made the most logical decision that was available to him. On the other hand, Kat figures out the phone's passcode and opens it to send Jim a message. Concurrently, Jim receives Kat's message and drops his phone before heading to the maternity ward. A few minutes later, Wong receives a text message informing him that the helicopter picking him up is expecting to arrive in 5 minutes. So he prepares to leave and checks on Kat, asking her how she feels. Kat then makes it clear she's not sick, and it isn't long before they start leaving the ward. However, while in the hallway, Kat notices that the businessman's axe is missing. Without warning, one of the infected patients from earlier cuts off a part of Wong's foot, forcing the doctor to shoot him in the head. Then, Wong shoots the other infected patient twice after throwing up on his wounded foot. Now injured, Wong orders Kat to help him stand, telling her she won't have access to the rooftop without him. So Kat helps Wong walk, but an infected Jim intercepts them. Then Wong shoots Jim only to hit him in the neck when Kat struggles. Unfortunately, Wong's gun misfires when he tries to shoot again, giving Kat the opportunity to steal his keys. On the other hand, Jim strikes Wong with a sickle, and before Kat's boyfriend finishes him off, the doctor confesses that he enjoyed killing the babies. With no time to waste, Kat immediately opens and locks the gate to the rooftop, leaving Jim infuriated. Then, Kat asks him how it feels to be infected, so Jim says it feels wonderful. He also tells Kat he now has a purpose in life, but when his girlfriend asks him what it is, he casually replies that it's to mutilate her body and smash her face. Realizing that her boyfriend is beyond saving, Kat starts sobbing. However, she soon begins laughing, implying she's been infected too. Then, Kat runs to the rooftop just when the helicopter arrives, but it isn't long before Jim hears several gunshots as he sits by the gate, dying.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.